Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for another entry in the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. This time round, we are reviewing 1941, which was released in 1979. And you best believe it, the amount of times this week I've Googled 1971 purely by mistake has been infuriating. But here we are talking another another Spielberg film in the series. Tate, how are we doing tonight?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. This is another one which I didn't actually know about until you were like, Tate, I need you to review 1941. I was like, another Spielberg film, got it. Never heard of this one. No idea what it's about. We'll see what's happening with it, but very interesting. We've got some
Yeah,
thoughts.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a lot to kind of say in a short amount of time. I think it's maybe going to be the phrase for the evening. But yes, obviously, if you guys have been familiar with the series, when a new person comes on, we interrogate them, we ask go through their memories. But Tate has been on this before. This is the first video about a new guest on, but there is a very big film coming in a week's time, which we're excited to get some more details about. So we're gonna allow that one to sort of simmer for this week. It's the sort of smaller entry because I guess it's fair to say this is sandwiched between not just Jaws and Close Encounters on one end, but Indiana Jones and E.T. on the other, which makes this film even weirder. But before we get into some of those behind the scenes things and whatnot, we'll go over the socials. So, do we have them on the screen?
Yes. So please comment below if you've seen 1941. If you've even heard of 1941, because I'm sure there are some of you going, 1941, what film is that? Please, if you have seen it, make sure to comment along, tell us your thoughts on the film. Share this video, subscribe, like everything as per usual with all of our videos. And if you'd like to follow us on social media to find out when the next reviews are coming out, when just kind of general things are happening with the channel, then go follow us on Twitter at cinema_savvy. On Facebook, just type in Cinema Savvy, and then letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy. Also go down into the link in the description to find our TeePublic link. This has kept me warm whilst being out here in Austria. It is very cozy. I cannot preach the jumpers and t-shirts more than I have done already.
Absolutely. And speaking of Austria, by the time this video goes up, you'll be back home in England.
Yes.
But the streak continues. You are in another. Maybe it's not a new room. Maybe it's another corner of the same room. But the streak continues. We had a couple of people commenting about that, and yes, Indiana Jones is going to be exciting to see what the location is for that. You need the Indiana Jones red dot thing eventually.
We need the map.
That's what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's put the theme on. We get copyright strikes. But you kind of mentioned this one. Let's before we even get into this, let's talk our sort of behind our history with it. I'm the same as you. When I pitched this to when I pitched this to you at the start of the year, and there were discussions about we want to do a big retrospective for this year. We had a great fun doing Bonds. We'd done series. We'd done other directors. I was like, Spielberg's the one. And when I was doing the thumbnails, because you know what I'm like, I was like, yeah, here's an idea. And then the next day, like, here's 34 thumbnails, which is really not normal, but it becomes it. I was going through some. I was like, what on earth is 1941? Like, why have? I mean, there's so many great Spielberg films that I've at least. I mean, not the ones I've not seen, but there are some I have heard of that I haven't seen, which is very normal. Things like The Terminal or something. But 1941 is even more elusive for me than Always and The Sugarland Express. I didn't know anything about this, and my shock at getting the artwork and seeing some of the names. Like Dan Aykroyd, I was like, "What? Dan Aykroyd? Who? No one speaks about this Dan Aykroyd Spielberg film, like John Belushi." And I was, I mean, maybe it rings of what was going to come, but the fact that I hope this doesn't sound like an ego. The fact I've never heard of this film with the cast it has, the director it has, the placement of it in his career, and I'd never heard of it until January this year. It was odd. I don't know if it's the same for you as well.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a bad omen when you see a cast this good and you know that the film isn't heard of from Spielberg of all people. It makes you think immediately, oh no, how bad is this film? Because everyone's done a bad film at some point in their careers, or there's a kind of something which you go, maybe that wasn't so good and stuff like that. And I feel like maybe this is Spielberg's that. I know that there are films like Always, which we'll get onto later on, which I've heard not the best of things about and stuff like that. But like this film, like when you see the cast, even looking at kind of the poster looks really fun. It looks really cool. It's kind of harkening back to the Carry On films and stuff like that, with their poster style and everything like that. It's very unusual. And if you kind of told me, oh, Spielberg tried to do a spoof film, you're like, ha ha ha, yeah, come on now. No, no, really, Spielberg tried to do a spoof film and it failed pretty hard. It's fascinating because, like you said earlier on, it is wedged between those amazing films. And it's just like, how on earth did this film fail? Especially when you look at who else was on board. Like, you have written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who went on to write like Back to the Future. It's like, how on earth did this combination of people and this film like completely fail? It's absolutely fascinating. So the plot synopsis on IMDb, a very, very short one this week. Hysterical Californians prepare for a Japanese invasion in the days after Pearl Harbor, which is very, very interesting. But
Yeah, here's how I feel with that. So, as I said, I knew nothing about the film. I hadn't seen clips. I hadn't heard the theme. Great theme. We'll get to the soundtrack later. We've mentioned a few times it's failed. This was a box office hit. We'll get to the box office later, but it was nowhere near the other film, so people called it a failure, which I don't think comedy would. But this film begins, even before we get into Spielberg, some of the behind the scenes stuff. It begins with I want to say, I don't know if it was meant to be a parody of the Star Wars crawl, but like there are opening titles. There are opening titles for films like Blade Runner, and there are opening titles for 1941, which is like reading an essay. It was a bit like The Eternals, but longer. And I was like, okay, where's it? Is this a joke or is this genuine? Setting the scene. Obviously, I'd imagine contextually, 1979, this film coming out. There are a lot of people that fought in World War II or were younger at the time that have distinct memories of probably the events and days after Pearl Harbor, which, I think it's a bit weird. And if we sort of look at some of the production stuff, you mentioned Robert Zemeckis. He originally pitched this as a drama. And this was about, there was an incident in 1942 or 3 where some of the things in this film did happen. I think like they're sort of thinking there'd be bombings or people putting like their army putting like military equipment on people's household drives and stuff like that. And the concept of a drama by Robert Zemeckis astounded me because I have no idea how this film goes from being considered as a drama to a comedy. And what surprised me the most, and maybe it's because me and you are a bit younger, right? We've grown up with Spielberg films like so many others, but maybe would you call it not the mature stages of his career, but sort of posts? It's unfair to say post as this, but he's a very different director now to when he was younger. And I think he's always said becoming a parent sort of shaped his filmmaking techniques and everything like that. And I'm struggling to imagine Steven Spielberg approaching this drama for probably very, very serious wartime moment, saying, you know what, let's make this a comedy, getting some of the guys on from SNL. And that's what sort of blew my mind, of a film like this is going to exist somewhere. But I don't think anyone would have expected to be directed by Steven Spielberg.
And this is very odd from multiple different perspectives. You've got kind of the Steven Spielberg thing, because I'll tell you that this looks nothing like any of his other work. Honestly, unrecognizable. Even when you looked at like Sugarland, you have the really nice long establishing shots and everything like that for every single scene. The great use of like severe close-ups and kind of the same with like long shots and stuff like that. But at the same time, like this film, it's so weird. You can't see anything Spielberg in this film. It's like, honestly, if you told me it was written by Zemeckis and it was directed by Spielberg at the end of the film, I would have said no. Not happening. Like, it's so unusual. And I'm just shocked because like there isn't even like a single shot that you can go, yeah, that was Spielberg. Or a single scene where it's like, yeah, you could imagine this Spielberg scene, apart from, I guess, the opening scene. But that's kind of, I mean, for people who haven't seen the film, we can go with spoilers here. This film's been out for like over 40 years now. So, but the opening scene is basically a complete spoof on the opening scene of Jaws, to the point where you even thought that you had the wrong kind of version of the film, right?
I thought, I was like, what's happened here? Like, have I got the wrong copy? Like, it was so weird because you get these titles, and it's a beach. Oh, okay, California beach, fine. Oh, look,
Yeah,
naked person running. Yeah, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, beach starting
And
on in
then the
Jaws. This
Jaws
person
music
looks,
kind of starts playing. It's like,
yeah, and it's the same actress from Jaws as well. And
yeah,
I was like, this isn't Jaws. And I was like, why do I think I'm watching Jaws for? And I think the weirdest thing with this, because the whole parody concept amazes me with film, how
Mm.
certain companies and directors are with parody. But I don't know if I've ever seen a director parody their
Parody
own
his own
work
work.
less than 5 years after it's come out. That's the other thing. And we know at the time Jaws was the biggest film in history. No, Star Wars had overtaken it at this point in time, refiguring the clocks. But you know, it all works out for a joke,
Yeah,
which I laughed at. I will give it this: the Hollywood joke. That I enjoyed that kind of aspect. That it was ridiculous, so ridiculously over the top. It wasn't a SNL sketch, the opening sequence, but to still get the attached director by Steven Spielberg, it just honestly it completely blew my mind. And as a sort of setup as where the film goes, the fact we begin with the Japanese army wanting to launch an assault on Hollywood in the days after Pearl Harbor is remarkable that was even greenlit. I know that sounds really unfair and maybe over the top. Maybe it's easy just to look at with modern lenses and
yeah,
see how we are with obviously we're still living through COVID, and how many tasteless COVID films have there been in the last 2-3 years?
yeah.
And post 9/11, a lot of post 9/11 films, things like American Sniper, Zero Dark 30, all rushed out within years of them happening. But this is like 38 years after, but
So there's been
it
time
still
for it to settle.
feels but it still feels quite fresh. I think
Yeah,
maybe the advancement of film from that 70s jump is remarkable. But again, I'm struggling to see this as a Spielberg film. And obviously we're going to, because it's Spielberg retrospective. But as you said,
yeah.
nothing alludes to it being what you'd expect from a Spielberg film, to the point of not like he's unknown where he has the same cast in every film and everything like that. The closest thing you have is John Williams. But I just, with so many Spielberg films, you look at it and think, that's Spielberg. You've got
Mm.
you've got this incredible story, or you're being wowed by the spectacle, or you're engrossed in what's happening, and you're following this journey of these people. And at no stage I sat here thinking, yeah, this is a Spielberg film that I'm really not even on the edge of my seat for. You just couldn't even place it with his other work. Even like West Side
No,
Story, which obviously is his newest one. I watched, I was like, wow, like Spielberg's doing a musical, and I can see it being a
yeah,
Spielberg film. And I just never got that sense of it. And what fascinates me is because I've not seen all of his films. I've seen a fair few of them. I know a lot about the others I haven't seen. Am I right in saying, is this his outright only comedy film? Comedy to the
from
official term comedy?
I mean, from what I can recall, nothing really comes off the top of my head as kind of standing out as a comedy. It's one of those areas he's
Yeah.
always kind of cemented his work in the dramas.
Like, I
So
remember Catch Me If You Can being very funny, but that's drama
yeah,
at heart. But it's
yeah.
very funny, and there's a tone to it. But with this, is it a one and done for comedy? And is there a gaping reason as to why?
I wonder if he just kind of struggled with the idea of maybe because when he was brought on board, it changed from being a drama to being a comedy. So I don't know why that decision was there. And having those actors in there, because I found this very interesting kind of looking into it. So all of or most of the people who are comedic actors in this film are SNL alumni, Saturday Night Live alumni. Um, Saturday Night Live have been running for a few years at this point, and the first Saturday Night Live film came out the year after, which was Blues Brothers, which featured a lot of these people in the film, funnily enough, especially John Belushi, kind of as like one of the leading characters. So it's very, very interesting because this is kind of technically like an unofficial Saturday Night Live film because it runs like a Saturday Night Live, like a really long Saturday Night Live sketch. And you actually mentioned that when you were messaging me when you were watching it, like it has that kind of format of set up the punchline way in advance, have some funny dialogue, and then have the punchline come later. And like a really kind of long sketch about just the war and kind of buffoonery within the war and stuff like that. I find it so unusual, kind of, is it a parody or is it a spoof? Because sometimes I kind of find it so hard to define the two of them. I know that spoof is kind of like heightened senses of the parody and stuff like that, but the fact that he's parodying his own film that he made recently, it makes it seem more like kind of that spoof area and stuff like that. But really interesting. I can think of one example of directors referencing their own work in a parody format recently after doing their work. So Russo brothers did Winter Soldier in 2014. In 2015, in the final series of Community, they did the elevator scene with the dean from the school, and pretty much was almost shot for shot with some comedic elements thrown in of that scene, which I find quite funny. But that's the only other instance, and that's a show which is so meta and so kind of self-referential that, of course, that would be kind of acceptable and stuff like that. I just find it really, really interesting that this is kind of the direction that he took in this film. I'm wondering, is that just kind of his relationship that he had with the writers? Is that kind of what relationship he had with like the actors? Because I have no idea how much of this was ad-libbed. They're very, very funny people, so you never know. A lot of it may have been kind of off the cuff and stuff like that, and then the film just swayed in that direction because of the way that they actors wanted to kind of portray the comedy in it. Who knows? I mean, I haven't been able to find any behind the scenes of this film at all, or really Spielberg talking about it full stop. So really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. That I mean, we might as well talk about a few of the characters that we get as well. I mean, we're not going to go through all of them. This ensemble is insane, but I guess we've spoke about Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi being in it, kind of playing themselves. If I'm going to be honest, I don't want to sit here and like review every character, but there's just a couple of noticeable ones. The one that really got me was Christopher Lee. Now, I don't know if Christopher Lee's been in any other Spielberg films. He's been in like every film in existence, so maybe. But getting Christopher Lee, one of the greatest, what would you say, like cinematic presences of all time? Like he has a presence like no other in cinema across its history. Even so, we had him in the Hobbit films when he was in his 90s. One of legend is an overstated term, but not for somebody like Christopher Lee. We get him playing a German captain, and he is dubbed. Now, I understand that he might not be able to speak fluent German, but when you have arguably the most distinctive voice in Hollywood and you get dubbed by a German, is that meant to be funny or is it part of it? I don't know, but I was mesmerized to see him in this. But what surprised me even more than
this was a few years after Man with the Golden Gun as well. I want to point that out. It was a few years after Man with the Golden Gun, but, like peak of his career.
and that's what kind of was weird to me, that we have Toshiro Mifune, I put on pronunciation, who you will know from stuff like Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, so many incredible Japanese. Yeah, and he's like randomly in this, and he's fine in it. It's a comedy, and he's speaking both in American and Japanese. But I was like, how have they got him for this? Sort of such a prestige back. And again, is it the Spielberg effect? Is it, hey, there's this young director that's done Jaws, that's done Close Encounters. He's doing a comedy. Do you want to be involved? Like, I wonder how those conversations would have gone back then. But just the ensemble cast completely blew my mind. And I think they're the two that really did it for me, thinking, how have they both been in this? And it's not like Chris Lee was never in a bad film at all. I'm not going to sit there and say that, but just to get him in there and not even have him with his own voice, I thought was odd.
It's also, is it not Mickey Rourke's first role, in a film? It's like maddening. Like, how? This film is bonkers from every single kind of sense of it. Like, if we were to just read out just some of the cast members from this film, because it's insane. So you got Dan Aykroyd, you got Ned Beatty, you got John Belushi, Lorraine Gary, like Christopher Lee, Warren Oates. Like, honestly, like the list that you could just go on with is insane. Like, it's maddening. Like, if you look at the Wikipedia kind of page, normally for like cast list, you'll just have the main members of the cast. No. This takes up 3 columns worth of like notable cast members. It's mad. Absolutely mad.
It's going to be like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's going to be like that next year. By the time this video comes out, they probably cast over like six American people in like background roles who were all A-listers or something. I don't know. It's insane. But and I think that's what surprised me more, is that when you have ensemble films, I don't say when they make them wrong, but it's just the fact it didn't work. And I kind of actually want to sort of segue even from characters into
Yeah.
there's not much to say about the story. In truth, it is essentially just 2.5 hours of silly sketches. What really surprised me and likely you was the runtime. Now, we both saw the director's cut, which is clocked in at a lovely 2 hours and 26 minutes. That might be the same amount of time as The Last Jedi, just off the top of my head. Just to compare a comedy from the 70s against a big blockbuster drama from today. And we had a conversation. I know you went on the Close Encounters video, but myself, Tom, and Jill had a really good discussion on director's cuts, because that had a massive director's cut in 1980. It was a massive hit in the cinema. And the story with 1941 is Spielberg originally had this film long, and they made him cut it for the cinema release in 79. And then because of the success of Close Encounters director's cut, special edition, sorry, not the director's cut, the special edition, they were then able to director's cut for this film, which put it back to its original running time. That is one of the most bonkers decisions. And what's surprising more is that obviously, I'm sure, we're both British, I guess it's worth saying that no doubt this film did better in America. Maybe it's the American humor. Maybe it's the names involved or the people that see these guys, as I said, on every Saturday Night Live, because although it was new, it was massive from the get-go. It's ingrained in pop culture how big it got so quickly. It's crazy that this film, I don't say it was a big hit, but this film was very popular in America.
Yeah.
Not aside from its box office. TV runs, Disney were involved in getting on the original Disney Channel. This had a solid distribution in America. And that's what really surprised me more than anything, is that it wasn't this cultural phenomenon for 5-10 years, and then when comedy reached a certain point, is that where it dropped off and no one spoke about it ever again? It was really bonkers. But I'm kind of curious to you, what are your thoughts on the whole director's cut thing? So what we kind of made a comparison to was that it's not a special edition like George Lucas, but the first set of changes he did to Star Wars, I think, were 1979. Making it episode 4 rather than Star Wars. I remember he switched up some of the sound effects, some of the visuals. Obviously, Spielberg of Close Encounters in 1980. I know this is 1979, this came out, but director's cuts, modern day, we're getting a bit carried away with how overused they are. Close Encounters, it worked perfectly. Star Wars, at the beginning, it worked perfectly. This just feels odd. This feels like they're cashing on Spielberg's name.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I know this film was somewhat of a commercial or financial success. It did okay, especially for its budget and stuff like that. But at the same time, if you're picking his films to have a special edition of this film, I don't think anyone was asking for that. If you look at some of the reviews from the time, they aren't nice. They aren't kind of good reviews. I think everyone went to go see the film because of the names involved, because it was, oh my God, Spielberg, this young director, he's doing a comedy film. That'll be a massive hit. It's not kind of it's in the same way that I would see kind of, oh, look, it's another Transformers film coming out. Of course, it's going to break the box office records. No one's actually going to watch the film because it's good anymore. People are going to go watch the train wreck. It's in that similar kind of vein. And the runtime of this film, for the length of the film, it's so long. It feels too long. Any sketch film, any comedy film needs to be shorter. You can't have a long comedy film. It just doesn't work. It's short, sharp jokes, or it's kind of long paid off jokes or anything like that. Either way, you've got to cut it to within 2 hours. Otherwise, people are just going to get bored. And I'm guessing that's what happened in this film, because there are long stretches of this film where I didn't laugh at all. I laughed maybe 4 or 5 times the entire film. There's good half an hour stretches where the film was just on and my eyes were glazed, because it was just like what am I watching? There's nothing funny about what's happening right now. There's nothing even dramatic about what's happening right now. Things are just happening, and you're hoping to laugh at, oh look, someone's been punched in the face. Great. That scene drags on for about half an hour. It's wow, fantastic. This film's just great, right? I didn't enjoy this film.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And then you get the repetition of a lot of those jokes getting repeated in different settings 40 minutes later, and it's, a lot of comedy is
somehow,
repetition.
somehow this film gets nominated for 3 Oscars. I mean, it's like,
Yeah,
what?
I mean, we'll say best cinematography, sound, and visuals. You know, for 1979, I mean, Alien came out that year. That's a comparison of what the visuals are up
Yeah.
to in other things. And cinematography really surprised me because I didn't think it looked good. But, you know, we always say every week, the Oscars aren't the be-all and end-all. But when you get the
No,
accolade, and is that accolade because it's a Steven Spielberg film? That's the other question, you know.
maybe. Had you already garnered that kind of reputation already
Yeah,
before this film?
especially after Close Encounters. And what I kind of want to touch upon is, you know, I've been pretty negative on this, and that's my kind of overall thoughts. But there's one standout, and that is the man that gets his own segment basically every week for the next few months now. John Williams' score has absolutely no right being as good as it is. Now that sounds really unfair. Now obviously we spoke, I think, in the Jaws video that, you know, a soundtrack can elevate anything. You can have
Yeah.
terrible films with good soundtracks, and they sound better thanks to the soundtrack. I present to you 1941. There are moments in this film, like you, where I was trying to watch it and I was really struggling. I didn't like the characters on screen, let alone the humor, a lot of the time. But his score was going in. I was like, this is a really good soundtrack for what I'm seeing. And I think in interviews, Steven Spielberg said that the March for 1941 in this film is one of his favorite pieces of John Williams' work. And John Williams always plays the 1941 theme, apparently, on tour. He's done it live many times. And it really surprised me because I would say, again, John Williams, the greatest of all time. I'm going to keep saying that almost every week until we get this series done. How, you know, just that. I know it's, you know, American military have their own music in real life aside, not like wrestling themes, but obviously if you're familiar, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the fact you're able to get a soundtrack to go with it, it really does elevate this film in certain moments. And when it's a comedy as well, not that comedies often have good scores, but it does elevate some of the ridiculous sketch aspect of it. Of look at this guy going into destroy an enemy plane, and you've got good John Williams music going on. And then it's like bonkers on screen, and we got to bring it. I wasn't a fan of anything but the soundtrack, if I'm being honest.
The soundtrack's easily the best thing in this film. I'm not making an excuse for this or anything like that, but we've already mentioned this before in previous reviews, especially coming up to the Oscars and stuff like that. If you want to get nominated for an Oscar in the soundtrack, the score category, or the visuals category, make a war film, because you will always get nominated if you make a war film. And it makes absolute sense that John Williams would do a war score. And of course, it's a fantastic score and completely like outperforms the entire film in general. Of course, that would be the case. Like, this score is fantastic. It's uplifting. It's bombastic. It fits to every single scene perfectly. It's more memorable than any other part of the film. Just in general, if you're rewatching through these films, you've already seen 1941. You don't have to watch the film. You can just listen to the score. Works perfectly fine.
Yeah, and again, that's the one thing I was surprised where this film has been pushed is its soundtrack. It's on the public YouTube pages. It's on John Williams' accounts. A lot of composers will hide some of their lesser scores, but this is right up there. And I guess that's a nice thing. Not the fact that we enjoy the score, but there's a benefit that they do still speak about at least the score in that respect and how that did work. But as often as we do this series, as you can tell, this has been a shorter one so far today. We will speak about how is it today. Now, no one speaks about this film today. That is an absolute safest. If you're going to tell anyone, hey, have you seen this comedy starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd?
Directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Robert Zemeckis.
But that's it. But just also find the one person that would associate those with this over Blues Brothers, or Spielberg and Zemeckis. Find me someone that's going to say this before Back to the Future. Because they did work on that with it. I know Spielberg. He obviously didn't direct it, but was he an executive producer? He was involved to a point.
He was a producer, I want to say, yeah.
Yeah, and you know they always have a working relationship with Zemeckis as well, and it's just bonkers. But we have to do it. Tayte, favorite scene or scenes if you're going to get a plural.
So there was one joke which got me, and it made me chuckle and laugh out loud, which is the scene where they get up onto, the dude said he's afraid of heights and stuff like that. And he's told, oh, you're going to have to go up on the Ferris wheel and keep lookout and stuff like that. So he's like, fine. He says, don't talk to me because I need to focus on like, you know, don't make a sound. And then the other dude just pulls out a ventriloquist doll. And I don't know why. That's the absurdism that just made me just go, just like, that got me. I don't know why that joke got me, but it's the whole kind of like, don't say a word, I'm trying to focus on this, and just like, okay, I won't say a word. And then he just pulls out the fucking ventriloquist doll, and you're just like, of course, that's a brilliant way around that and stuff like that. And I thought that was quite a fun kind of joke put into the film. Apart from that, the opening scene got me as well. Like, the opening scene was quite a fun scene with the submarine and stuff like that. But no, this film didn't have too many favorite scenes to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it. I mean, it's the Jaws thing. I mean, who'd have thought me praising Jaws to a point? You know, when you think you got the wrong film and then you realize it's all a joke, and it worked. The fact they have the original actress, you got to take your hat off. That is, there's parody and there's that level of respect to parody, and without jumping into the George Lucas hype train, George Lucas loved parodies of his work. He's obviously one of Spielberg's best mate, not stretching there, but I wonder if the two of them, because they're all sort of nerds, they all love their stuff, and I wonder if Spielberg's a bit more aware than maybe we are of stuff like that. That maybe he does enjoy that kind of thing, and I just thought it's a neat opening sequence, and again, it's the whole when they start chanting Hollywood, and you kind of realize that we know that Hollywood is ridiculous, but it's they were finding about the one other thing I'll give it is the character. He reminded me of not Pepper from Bond. I forgot his name. The from Bond, have I forgotten his name? That's really embarrassing. He was in Man of the Golden Gun, the policeman. It's really embarrassing.
Sheriff. Sheriff.
Really
he is Pepper, isn't it? It's
it is Pepper.
Is it Wiley?
I forgot the name, but there's a character like him in this who has the amazing joke that he's called Harry Ward or Harry Wood. Now
J.W. Pepper.
Sheriff Pepper. Sheriff Pepper, that's it. When they get this Harry Ward character,
Sheriff J.W. Pepper.
I did laugh at that scene, and it's one of the few scenes that I laughed at, and I hope it doesn't come across, but I don't mean it in respect of they can't pronounce Hollywood properly. It's just that simplistic name. They've gone and kidnapped the wrong person. They're all dressed up as trees, and they kidnap him, take him to the boat, and he almost does give away where Hollywood is on the map. I thought that was a funny joke. That was one of the very few ones that got me going. And obviously, then he has the whole pretending to be on the toilet, throwing.
What's it called? The prune juice. He's like, we have other ways of getting it out of you.
Yeah,
what is that? Prune juice? Oh no!
He just throws the shoes in to obviously, and it's the sound effects, and that scene made me laugh a couple of times. Very childish, but that comedy worked, and it's not stuff you expect from Spielberg as well. Which I'm going to add, even the ventriloquist thing he said. But that's all I can really give it in terms of favorite scenes. I'm not going to harp on it too much and just keep saying how much I disliked it, but if we're going to move into our final thoughts on this film, which is
final thoughts,
fair.
Honestly, if you're doing a Spielberg retrospective and you're watching along with us as we go along through every single Spielberg film, you have to watch this film. If you're just casually coming along to see kind of, oh, should I watch this film and stuff like that? And if we're giving an honest opinion as film reviewers, you should not watch this film. Don't waste your time with it. There are way better films you can watch. There are way better spoof films, way better parodies and stuff like that. There are just way better Spielberg films you can watch, way better films of these actors and stuff like that. It's one of those things where if you're doing the completionist thing and watching through all the films like we're doing with every single Spielberg film, you kind of have to watch it. But we're not going to force you to do that. Watch this review, obviously. I mean, you will be anyway because you're kind of watching it right now. But at the same time, you don't have to watch this film. You can watch clips from this film. I'm sure you can on YouTube. You can watch the trailer and then decide whether I want to watch it or not on that. But I personally wouldn't recommend it. I know we're doing kind of at the end of it a Spielberg film ranking and stuff like that. If we're doing a lowest ranking, this is easily in the top 5. Easily.
Yeah, I'm literally the same as you here. That I wouldn't have seen this film if I wasn't going through. Again, I didn't know this film existed. But this is the completionist. You're doing them in order. You have to do all of them. This is on the list to see, and now it has been seen for the very first time. This isn't one I'm going to be in a rush to go back to. of the 5 we've done so far, it's really embarrassing that obviously 4 of them are all first viewings for me. I would 100% be wanting to see Duel again or Close Encounters to develop that more than see this. I'd even terrorize myself with another viewing of Jaws because this one doesn't work.
I feel like Sugarland's getting shafted here. I enjoyed Sugarland. I feel like Sugarland's getting the short end of the stick here.
it was. I'd watch Sugarland over this by Country Mile. Don't get me wrong, but not over Close Encounters, Jaws, and Duel though. But this is where I'm with this. It's just such an. I think like the best perception of this film. I said it a few times. It's just odd. I don't understand the logistics of how this film did and has come to be, with the people involved, as you said, the director involved, the production, the score, everything. It's so odd that this film was made, but it's not surprising that it isn't spoken about anymore. And that's kind of how I feel with this film. It's a one and done. I don't see anyone ever going out their way to watch it unless they're going through, as I said, films of Spielberg, or they're going through, John Belushi's work, or Dan Aykroyd, or so many of those other people. But as I said, even those comedians, they've all got much bigger films they've worked on that came out after or before, and everything. So, not the most positive, but this film is out there. It has been done. And I said, we picked out a few highlights. If you're a massive John Williams fan, listen, that's going to be the best thing you get for this. And so be it. He is an absolute legend of the game. But that is going to round out our review for 1941. So please do comment your thoughts. If you haven't seen the film, but you stuck around for this, let it be known that this video is almost 2 hours shorter than the film, which is incredible in its own right. How on earth is 2 hours 20? We do not know. So please do comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. If you're a fan of these videos, there's a lot more Spielberg stuff on the way. There's a lot more videos on the way of many forms, which we always talk about. But we've got to talk about what is coming soon. And next up, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark coming Tuesday, the 3rd of May. More details will be announced nearer the times in regards to who is joining us for that one. Obviously, these are being pre-recorded. And obviously, as we have been doing, we have been tweeting on the days we're watching the films or the days we're recording to let us know your thoughts. We didn't do it for 1941 for very obvious reasons, but do join us for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And where we are in the retrospective, we have the coming soon section. So I mentioned Raiders is next. We'll have a look at the sort of roadmap coming up. So E.T. follows it on the 10th, which is going to be very interesting. We've got Twilight Zone, the movie, on the 17th, and then we go back to Indiana Jones in a prequel with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 24th of May. That is quite the feat. I mean, I've not seen Twilight Zone, but it's nice that I'm going to be able to go revisit films I have seen this time around now. But, as we've kind of said in this series, that when we bring up his 4, there's never a run of 4 bad films. There's at least like 2 masterpieces in every 4, I would say. Certainly at this point. Maybe when we get to the noughties, people might change their opinion. I don't know. But looking at what's ahead, 1941 is done. It has been and gone. But that is what's coming up. And we're going to bring the socials for you to have a look at when you're at home as well. So it's Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. Links to public in that description down below.
Okay, guys, and once again, for everyone watching along, thank you. Tune into the next one, and we'll see you around.